the JavaScript thread, it'll keep going, and it'll stop. It'll wait at the await. It says wait, you know, like the stop sign where it's like wait. Merry Christmas, all my bolliches to you. Guys, what's going on? Welcome to an episode. Well, excuse me, this is actually going to be a tutorial. Let me get some tunes on for y'all. This is going to be an async await JavaScript tutorial. And Merry Christmas. It's Christmas season, hence the jingle bells, folks. Whenever you may not be watching this during Christmas season. You could be watching it mid-November next year, for all I know, which is still Christmas season. You could be watching it mid-July next year, but that's still half Christmas. You're welcome for the joy. So today what I want to talk about is, I'm gonna get a little sip of coffee real quick. But today what I want to talk about is asynchronous JavaScript. Async and await JavaScript, right? Specifically the just how it kind of works. And all I've done so far is just a drop off a project or excuse me, a folder into VS Code. And I just want to cover a little bit about async and await JavaScript. So let's dive in here. I'm gonna right click and get a new file. I'll say script.js. So this should be here, and I'll make an index.html file just so we can run the script pretty easily. So real quick, boom, and I'll have this repository in the description as well. So let me just build a script tag real quick. Source, we'll say script.js, boom. Okay, so it's all linked up. We just linked up an HTML file really quick to our JavaScript. Let's just test it real quick. So test. I'm going to fire off a live server. Again, just making sure I have that live server extension. That's the biggest useful thing. So I'll hit Command Control P and I'll say live server. Live server, open with live server. Let's open it up. Guys, just the rudimentary stuff. Just to make sure we're firing off and getting, let me pull up my console. Boom. Okay, so here we go. We see that text come through of test. So we do know that it is working. So let me pop that off to the side here. Let's see if it'll work live. Put that on this window. So I'm going to write another console log test. I'll say test2 just to see we can live update the console on the right here. That's all I want to show you guys, because we're just going to go through just a simple async and await example. So before going into the example, I like to conceptually talk about things and then put concept to code. Understanding stuff conceptually really helps me digest it a lot better. So, and for anybody following the blockchain series, you guys know exactly how much I'm breaking things down conceptually, or attempting to rather. But let's fire open a Lucidchart diagram. And I want to talk about, you can see some of the blockchain series lucid charts. But so asynchronous and await JavaScript, when would we use it and why do we use it? So typically we use it because we're waiting for a response from the server. That's simple. So that sounds like a huge thing, but let's just break it down. So we have the client, which is like your computer, like the computer I'm recording this all on here. This is like the client computer, right? Then we have servers. So, and maybe the server is associated to a database and all this stuff on the back end, but and I'm not going to play more music, guys. Let's just hone in on the concept real quick, right? So we have the server, right? And the client makes requests to the server typically. So let's say you have a request that says, I want data. Maybe you're fetching like a user's first name or something, right? I want data that looks like this. That has like a user ID. So we'll say user ID 1, and then we'll say like username tags, right? So here's our object. Here's our JavaScript object. I know it's, let's see if we could put the casing like this, right? Or the text alignment like this. Okay, so on the client, maybe we sign in, or maybe we're doing some sort of function that says, I want this data. Just ignore the function for now. Just focus on the larger scale concept. The granularities of the function are irrelevant right now. But basically, we have a request of the front end. Well, let me actually separate these two, right? So the front end says, I want specifically user data, some function, right? Some function that fetches it, something that happens that says, I want user data. The data exists somewhere here on the server. It really is going to exist on the database, but for intensive purposes, it exists on the server. The client fires off this request. This arrow represents an HTTP request. So it says, I want data. Like I click a button that says login or something, and boom. The server now has to go to the database and go get this data, and then cooks it up and gives it to the client, and sends it back in an HTTP request. Okay, here's an HTTP response 200. Here's your data. Boom. Here's your user ID, and your username is Pags. And then on the front end, we can do something with that. But while this is happening, when the client clicks the button that says like login or something, it can take a second. It can take 2 seconds. It depends. This process right here, this line right here, that the request is going and then the data is coming back. This line right here, it can take time. It can vary. Typically, every response is going to be a little bit different timing-wise. It might be super fast, might be super quick, might be a few milliseconds apart. But basically, what I'm saying is it's going to take some time. Could be 1 second, could be 5 seconds, could be 10 seconds. Maybe you have really bad Wi-Fi, and this request happens, and then this data ultimately gets delivered back after the request. So request happens, data comes back. And the reason why we want to use async await is because this could take time. So let's just break it down real quick. Let's now go to our console log, and let's build a function, right? That's associated to that example that we just said. So I'll say get user data, right? Oh God. And let's get the user data. So I'm going to build some dummy data. So I'll say const dummy data, and this would be data on the database. But for intensive purposes of here, this will work great. So we'll follow the same thing. We'll say user ID 1 and username Pags. So if I click this button, and let's just console log this, right? So console log dummy data. And to click it, I'm just going to post the function inside the JavaScript. So when I press save, I haven't saved yet, it should fire off and we should see the dummy data over here in our console log. So let's boom. Here we go. So we have user ID and username Pags. Let me delete these console log.tests or test1 and test2. So all we've done is just built a dummy bit of data. And in this get user data, it's going to simulate going to the server. And I'm going to show you two cases. One, it'll say get user data with async and await, and then the other will be get user data with no async and await. So what I'm going to use is a set timeout function. So how can I do this? I'll say, let me break this down in a real quick way and live think this out with you guys. So we have the user data, and I want to have another function right here, and this will be this part of the equation will simulate the database. So here's how it would actually happen, right? Or one way it could actually happen is when that request fires off so the data actually is going to exist on the database. It's not going to exist on the server. So the client will make the request to the server. The server will then say, okay, I need to do something. I'll fire off to the database and I'll find, whatever information. The API will fire off and find the information that it needs. And then it'll ultimately fire that back off here. So that's how it would actually go from a client to server to database relationship. So we're going to build a function that kind of simulates this in a really small way. It might sound complicated right now, but I'm just going to build a function that gets the data from the database. Okay, function. I'll say get data from database, and this is where it's going to take time. We'll simulate this. So I'll say return dummy data, And maybe it'll take a long time to get the dummy data. But let's just console log this and see if we can get the dummy data. So from our quote unquote database. So if I save, boom, we have a return dummy data. How can I do this? This way. Boom. Okay. So we're console logging this function just to simulate what this database function is doing. I'm going to add a set timeout, and this set timeout is going to take, let's just say, 2 seconds to get the dummy data, right? Like a database, it could take that long from a server standpoint. It really could. So so when I press enter, it's going to take a moment to fire off. Well, hold on. Let's see how to do this. Let's think about it. Boom. Okay, so that's going to work. So I want to show you guys why we use async and await. So I'm going to say console. Basically what I want to show you is the function fires off first, but then it takes a moment for the data to come back. So let's say function fires off. So immediately the function fires off, then the data is retrieved. So I'll write another console log here that says data retrieved, data returned, or something like that. That's fine. So step one, right? When we press that login button or something, we're going to click this get user data button that says like click. And in this get user data, immediately what it's going to do is fire off to get this data from the database. So maybe I actually don't need all this extra function stuff. We can just keep it simple. But I wanted to maybe I can console log the dummy data here even. And then not have to put it there. Okay, so boom. Function fires off, and then the data is returned from the database. But we may have a few things, and how is this going to work? Let's see with async and await. Guys, I'm trying to build a JavaScript one without having a real server, so it's a weirdly tricky, right? Versus a real server. When you want to get the data, you just say async and then await to wait for this data. So yeah, let's figure it out. Let's figure out how to do this. Okay, so console log, guys, I've got it. Okay. So how the JavaScript thread works is it's going to fire off line 7 and then line 8 and then line 9. And then if you need to continue doing your operations, console log, let's say run line 10. It should get the data first, and then ultimately continue the thread after this function's fired off. So let's see. Let me put it in ChatGPT real quick because it's not performing as I anticipated it to. So here we go. We need to make this a promise, is what it is. So ChatGPT has wrapped it in a try catch. Let's just get out of the try catch real quick, just to not overcomplicate the code. But you typically do want to have try catches wrapped around your responses, or have some sort of error handling deal. But so you guys can ignore this. More than likely, your function for getting data is not going to look like this. It's probably going to be some sort of Axios or TRPC request or a fetch request with some headers. This is just to simulate a server going down some sort of HTTP response, taking time, and then we're waiting for that response to be resolved. So you can see that, and I'll remove this console log on line 17. But you could see that the JavaScript thread, it goes through line 7, line 8, then it hits line 9, and it's waiting for the data, right? It'll wait as long until the promise is resolved. So you guys could see that we have line 7, 8 fire off immediately, and then it takes that 2 seconds. And then we have the run line 10, and the data ultimately shows up. The data ultimately shows up, and then it runs line 10. So, guys, but that is, and maybe we could also even do console time. And we could say, and we obviously know it's 2 seconds, but say console time end, I believe it is. So it took weirdly just right over 2 milliseconds, but you could see that this response, and even this is probably going to be a good example because it'll probably show just small fluctuations. 2002 milliseconds, and obviously in milliseconds you might be like, oh well, what's the difference? Not a huge deal. But maybe you have another function immediately after this that's like function show data on front end, right? Excuse me. So let me do this, and this function needs the data. Show data on front end. Hold on. Front end. Boom. Let's build this function. So function show data on front end, and all this is just going to be console log some component, or better yet, I'll say user ID, right? Like just as your component might be, right, where it has like, you know, the user ID, and maybe it takes data.user ID and then username, and it would take username, right? Just maybe it's like something that just shows the username. So the reason why we async and await it is because this component needs those things. So I'm going to remove this line 10 so we don't see the data. Let's pretend this is some component on the front end that needs to show your user ID and username. So I'll even remove line 10. We don't need that anymore. So run line 7, run line 8. Then the data gets fetched. But because we're async and awaiting this, the show data on front end, the JavaScript thread, it'll keep going, and it'll stop. It'll wait at the await. It says wait, you know, like the stop sign where it's like wait. But it'll literally wait until this data is fetched, and then it'll continue down the thread and fire off this next function. I'll show you guys though if we do not await it. So watch, we're gonna have a different error. It comes up as undefined. There's no data, and then the data fires off, and the function finishes. So this is why we use async and await, because the data, like the function right here, it's literally one tiny thing that could change how your data is working, if it breaks your front end component or not. And it's just because you're waiting for the data, and then your component shows the data after the data shows up. But if you don't wait for the data, your function, it's just running line 7, it runs line 8, then it runs line 9, and then it immediately runs to line 10, and line 10 needs the data. So there, but there's no data. So that's why over here on the right it shows undefined. And we obviously would call that a broken component. So that's why asynchronous JavaScript is so important. And just remember the biggest thing. That's not what I meant to remember. But the biggest thing, just async and await. Easy way to remember it is wait, await. Just wait. That's all it means. It just means this line is waiting for some response. You're just waiting right here. So JavaScript thread is going 7, 8, wait until you have resolved your response. Whether it's a good response or a bad response, you have to wait. And then you move on to your next step. So I hope that was a useful tutorial for you guys. It's Christmas time. I will see you on the next one. Cheers.